Okay guys, today we're going to be talking about access modifiers, and this is, honestly, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this is one of the more complicated things. If you can understand this, you will have no problem with all the other videos. Access modifiers are extremely good for us, and they save us a lot of time. They're hard to understand when you first hear the concept, but when we actually start writing code, you're going to see where these actually become really useful. So there are three types of access modifiers. I'm going to skim through this really fast and be as basic as possible. But basically we have public, which means that anything declared with the public access modifier means it can be accessed anywhere within our code. If we declare it with the private access modifier, it can only be accessed within the class itself, so no other classes can access the variable. And then any components declared with the protected access modifier mean nothing outside of the class can access it, but things that inherit from our class can access it. And now I'm going to talk about inheritance a little bit. But first I'll describe the different access modifiers. Public variables, here we have two classes. We have a light component and a gun. In this case, since we have declared light intensity as being public, gun can just go ahead and change it. So gun is, gun shouldn't be able to change the intensity of the light. It doesn't even make sense, right? Gun shouldn't be able to change the intensity of the light, but because we've made it public, gun can do that. So in this case, we would want to use a private variable. Private means that the light intensity can only be changed by the light itself, which makes a lot more sense. There's not really any reason why a gun should be able to change the intensity of a light. The only real example I can think of is maybe we would have something where if you shoot the light with your gun, then we would change the intensity to 0. And then the light would be blown out, but you wouldn't be able to see the light anymore. And it would look like we shot the light out. So you can make it that if the gun's bullet hits the light, change the intensity to 0. In that case, we would want to use a public variable, because gun's going to change the intensity. But if we didn't have anything like that, the only thing that should be able to change the light's intensity is the light itself. Finally, we have protected variables. So guns still can't change the light's intensity. This is exactly like a private variable. But in this case, we have a class called streetlight, and we have told streetlight we want it to inherit from light. And when we start writing code, I will do some protected variables. You will see them in some of the code videos that I do. Basically, if a variable is protected, when a class inherits from it, so for example streetlight inherits it, it gets its own copy of light intensity. So say we have 10 streetlights in our level, we would make a class called streetlight, and then each streetlight would get its own intensity, which makes sense, right? So, inheriting. How do we use it? What is the use of it? And hopefully, after I show you these two slides, you will understand kind of why we use inheritance. And the real reason we use inheritance is so that we write less code. It simplifies things a lot, and you only want to write something once. When you're writing code, you only want to write something once. This is why we use inheritance. There's an abbreviation for it. Oh man, I've totally forgotten it. Learned it in school ages ago. There's some sort of abbreviation. It's like only write once and it stands for something. I don't know, but the deal is, in programming, you only want to write something once because it simplifies your code a lot more. It makes it a lot shorter, and that's where inheritance comes in. So here is an example of where we would use inheritance. Say we were making a first-person shooter. Well, we would start by making our class gun. You might think, why don't we just make a bunch of guns? Why don't we make a class M4A1 and a class Barrett 50 caliber and a class rocket launcher and a class whatever? The reason we do this is because we want things to be simpler. So we start by declaring a base class, gun. This is the base of all guns, because all guns are going to have a model, all guns are going to have gun ammo, All guns are going to have a damage that they inflict on other players. All guns are going to have a name, right? So, we create our base, and then we let other classes inherit from this base. So here we have a class Sniper, inherits all of this stuff from Gun. So we've told the Sniper here, inherit from Gun. So now the Sniper has a gun model, it has a gun ammo, it has a damage inflicted, and it has a gun name, because it inherited all of that from Gun. On top of that, however, we have added a zoom amount, because Snipers are going to have some sort of zoom amount. Guns, not all guns are going to have a zoom amount, right? Not all guns have scopes on them, so not all guns are going to have a zoom amount. Only Snipers are. So we tell Sniper, inherit from Gun, but on top of that, we're going to declare a zoom amount. Then, when we want to actually make our Snipers, we just let our Snipers inherit from Sniper class, so Remington 700, Barrett 50, etc. Next up, we have another class, Melee class. So class Melee inherits from class Gun. Because all melee classes are going to have a gun model, they're going to have gun ammo, which would be equal to infinity, because obviously a melee weapon's never going to run out of hits. The amount of damage the melee weapon inflicts, and a name for our melee weapon. But then on top of that, we've said, okay, we also want to have a melee range as well. Not all guns are going to have melee range, only melee guns are. So we tell melee, inherit from gun, but on top of that, add melee range. Then we can make a knife, and we could say, for example, knife, the knife ammo is infinity, the knife damage inflicted might be 100, the knife's name is Bowie knife, for example, and that's what we could do. Lastly, we have launcher. So we're saying again, launcher, inherit everything from gun. So launcher now has the model, the ammo, the damage, etc. But on top of that, let's create a blast radius as well, because not all guns are going to have a blast radius, just launchers. Then, when we want to make our launchers, we let launchers inherit from the launcher class. So here I have a class lore, a class RPG, and that inherits from launcher, right? And that is it, really. That's kind of inheritance. If you don't fully get it, that's okay. For now, just know that what we're doing is we're just breaking everything into parts. We're creating trees, and this is how we would structure our code. You want to make things as simple and as basic as possible. You do not want to complicate things, so we use inheritance. You'll kind of understand more how this works. In some of my programming tutorials, I'm going to be showing more on inheritance. But for now, just know that this is kind of an example of how we would use inheritance. So anyways, guys, I will see you in tutorial number 3 of the basic series.